Rostov-on-Don, July 22, 1978. After the steam, 19-year-old Lena heads to the train station. The train is almost an hour away. On the platform, she notices a man who smiles pleasantly and jokes about the heat. He offers her a cold beer. There's a stall nearby. While we wait, let's cool down. Lena hesitates, but the heat and the long wait take their toll. She agrees. They walk along a narrow path past a cornfield. The man talks cheerfully, tries to make her laugh, and the girl gradually calms down. A few minutes later, he suggests cutting through the corn thickets. Lena follows him, and this becomes the last decision in her life. The next evening, her body is found in the corn. Signs of a brutal attack, traces of violence, numerous injuries. It is from this moment that the story begins, which would later be called the darkest case in the history of Soviet forensics. The inspection of the scene shocks the investigators. The brutality is not like a domestic conflict, it is the signature of a predatory attack. But the leadership demanded a quick result. Not an analysis, not a search, namely, the culprit. The very next day, a local man, Alexander Kravchenko, who had a previous criminal record, was detained. He was not seen nearby. There is no evidence, but he is a convenient option. Kravchenko sits at the table, wringing his hands. The investigators are pressing, using psychological pressure, threats, and even physical force. Experts indicate that the handwriting of the crime does not belong to him and does not correspond to his style at all. He physically could not have committed such acts, and the traces found at the scene do not match his. But the decision has already been made. The case is solved. The report is closed, and no real investigation is ever conducted. In the 1970s and 1980s, the concept of a serial killer officially did not exist in the USSR. Such crimes were considered a Western phenomenon. Therefore, even when they had the typical handwriting of a maniac, the authorities refused to recognize it. The fatal mistake in the Kravchenko case gave the real criminal complete freedom of action, a sense of complete psychological security, and 3 more years of absolute impunity. Kravchenko was placed in a temporary detention cell while investigators examined the circumstances. However, there was no real investigation. In those years, the USSR did not officially recognize the existence of maniacs and serial killers, so the police needed to close the case as quickly as possible. He was convicted of assaulting a girl, found guilty of her death, and accused of concealing the crime. The court handed down the harshest sentence, the death penalty. After a 3-year lull, when the Zakatnova case was closed, the murderer who would later be called Chikatilo returns. He walks slowly along the crowded bus platform among hundreds of people who will never remember his face. His gaze falls on 23-year-old student Larissa Tkachenko. She is standing alone, waiting for her friends. He approaches politely, almost shyly. No one pays attention to this conversation. A woman and a man near the train station are a common occurrence. A few minutes later, they walk towards the forest belt, and no one sees Larissa again. In 1981, district police stations throughout the Rostov region begin to record the disappearance of people one after another. A young woman who was going to visit an acquaintance disappears. A schoolgirl who was returning from school does not arrive home. A teenager who was last seen near a railway platform disappears. The crimes occur in different cities, and therefore no one connects these cases with each other. Each investigator works within the framework of his own case, not seeing the overall picture. The system does not realize that this is already the beginning of serial crimes. Chikatilo tried several times to restrain himself and stop his criminal behavior, but these attempts almost never worked. One such episode occurred at the school where he worked as a teacher. He left one student after class under the pretext of extracurricular activities, closed the door to the classroom, and being under the influence of the already committed first crime, began to molest the girl. She began to scream and actively resist, which frightened him, and abruptly stopped. There were several more similar cases. Among the school children, he even received the nickname billiard player, which in local slang meant an overly concerned teacher. Due to constant complaints and explanatory notes from the students, Chikatilo was eventually expelled from school. 1982. Children aged 10 to 17 and women aged 18 to 27 begin to disappear en masse. The The bodies of the victims are found in different parts of the Rostov region, usually in the nearest cities, located 5 to 30 kilometers from each other. The killer's handwriting is identical, but in those years there was no centralized database of missing persons. Investigative districts did not transfer information to each other. Many children who disappeared were written off as runaways, and no one collected statistics on serial killers. As a result, crimes that occurred at a distance were considered dissimilar. And Chikatilo became more and more convinced that he was leaving no traces for the system. Rostov-on-Don, Novoshakhtinsk, Shakhty, Kamensk-Shakhtinsky, Novocherkassk. Every month, a new city and a new victim. And no one even imagines that all these places are connected by one person. 1983 is approaching, and only now will the state begin to realize that this is not an accident. That these are not simple disappearances, but the work of a serial maniac. In mid-1983, the entire Rostov region begins to fear the night, train stations, even their own yards. The Ministry of Internal Affairs finally reacts. General Fedosov is sent to Rostov, a tough, disciplined leader who understands that what is happening cannot be explained by domestic crimes. Fedosov assembles a new format operational group, practically a military operation. Criminalists, forensic experts, operational workers, analysts, volunteer people's brigades, combat komsomol brigades, road patrol service, local police officers, traffic police. This group has the code name Forest Strips, since most of the bodies were found in forest strips. As you already know, the party that ruled the country ordered this operation to be carried out as quickly as possible, because there is no place for impunity in the USSR. By order of Fedosov, an extensive search network is deployed across the region. Plainclothes operatives stand watch on railway platforms, monitoring every suspicious passenger. At night, patrol units comb through forest belts and remote roads. Covert surveillance is set up at key stations. Investigators compile a detailed train schedule and compare it with the locations where children most frequently disappear. Psychiatrist Alexander Buchanovsky was involved in the investigation, the only specialist at that time who really knew how to create psychological portraits of serial criminals. Having analyzed all the episodes, he formed a profile with such accuracy that his conclusions would later be called prophetic. Buchanovsky describes the killer as a man between 40 and 50 years old with an intelligent appearance who most likely worked as a teacher or office worker. He notes that the criminal has serious sexual problems, acts suddenly but very carefully, and in everyday life behaves quietly, inconspicuously, and non-conflictively. At that time, no one even guessed that the psychiatrist had actually described Chikatilo almost word for word. The situation was complicated by the fact that imitators began to appear in the region. People who tried to copy the handwriting of the real criminal created additional chaos in the investigation. Because of these imitators, the operation became more and more complicated, and the search for the real killer was delayed. Each man who even partially matches the description of a potential suspect is checked individually. The operation involves a volunteer militia and everyone who wants to help. Among the volunteers is Chikatilo himself. He joins the volunteer militia, where he is issued a special document, and this is how he joins the search, trying to divert suspicion from his own actions. The irony is striking. The murderer, along with everyone else, is looking for himself. This step gives him several more years of complete impunity. None of the men arrested during this period matched his true criminal profile. Chikatilo uses his status as a volunteer. He tells the victims that he was sent by the police, and they need a witness. The victims agree and follow him. Again a new victim, and again a body is found near the forest strip. Chikatilo works cleanly and professionally, no matter how terrible it may sound. All the bodies had characteristic traces of sexual violence and cruel treatment. The most injuries were recorded in the intimate areas. There were severe injuries and tissue destruction. Such repetition of injuries in each case clearly indicated the same method of action of the attacker. Each detainee in the case was checked as thoroughly as possible. Blood and sexual fluid tests were taken and compared with biological traces found on the bodies of the victims. Chikatilo was also examined in the same way. He underwent all the same procedures as other suspects. Chikatilo repeatedly ended up in the police. He was detained, interrogated, and explanations were taken. But each time it ended in nothing. There was not enough evidence, and he was released again. They even took his blood and sperm to compare with materials from crime scenes. And this is where the key mistake occurred. Chikatilo had blood type A, while the biological traces on the victims gave the result of AB, so the experts believed that they were different people. This is explained by a rare biological feature. In some people, the group can manifest itself differently in the blood and sexual fluids. Due to a violation of the secretory status or mosaicism, the antigens in his sperm formed a picture of AB, while the blood remained group A. The Soviet examination of the 80s did not take into account such anomalies, and it was this mistake that postponed the moment of his exposure for years. For 6 years, Chikatilo continued to commit his crimes. Later in court, his defense will insist that he is a mentally ill person and needs treatment, not a sentence. This is exactly what the lawyers will build their defense on. In 1990, Chikatilo killed again, but this time he made a fatal mistake. The victim managed to bite him, and this bite was the key to his arrest. The police were no longer going to let him go, as they had done before. They took him in right after he left the hospital.
Andrei Chikatilo, you are detained for committing murder. Please come with us.
Everything pointed to Chikatilo, but there was no concrete evidence. Only one detail put an end to it, the same bite. In the hospital, Chikatilo claims that he was bitten by a dog, but the examination shows otherwise. It was a human bite. The bite matches the last victim, who was found in the forest the day before, with the same handwriting as before. Hours of interrogation yield nothing. He remains silent, although panic, fear, and trembling are visible in his behavior. Then psychiatrist Alexander Buchanovsky is invited again. He calmly talks to him about his fatigue and the impossibility of living like this. Chikatilo breaks down, first tears, then a confession. In one night, he describes in detail dozens of crimes that the investigation had no idea about. He shows places, schemes, and little details. He confesses to 56 murders. In court, 52 will be proven, but the investigators know he hid almost nothing. Thus ends the longest and darkest investigation in the history of the USSR. 1992, Rostov-on-Don. The hall is full of journalists, relatives of the victims, and armed guards. Chikatilo stands in a cage on a raised platform. He listens to the verdict without emotion. The maximum penalty is execution. The Forrester case is officially closed. After the verdict, Chikatilo writes an official appeal to the President of the Russian Federation. He asks to pardon him, reduce the sentence, and reconsider the sentence. The letter is written in a clear, even handwriting. It is clear that he spent more than one day preparing it. A few weeks later, the answer arrives. Pardon denied. This is the final decision. In February 1994, guards enter Chikatilo's cell and inform him that he is being taken to Moscow for additional examination. In those years, convicts were never warned that this was the execution of sentence, so he does not suspect anything unusual. In the official building, he is led down a corridor and taken to a dark room. Without explanation, without warning, the procedure is carried out quickly. The shot puts an end to a case that has lasted for more than a decade. Thus, Operation Forest Stripe finally closes the darkest chapter in the history of the USSR. Everything you have seen up to this point is a reconstruction of events created solely for a deeper immersion in the atmosphere of the case. And now before you are the last frames of a real interview with Andrei Chikatilo. No actors, no staging, real words, real emotions, something that will forever remain in the archives of the investigation.
Andrei Romanovich, this is your last official interview. Tell me, did you feel remorse for all your crimes?
I don't know what I should feel remorse for. I was accused of so many things, dozens of episodes, and they wanted to count 70 more. I don't know what's true and what's not.
Okay, then the last thing. What are you thinking about now before the execution?
What am I thinking about? I haven't lived here for a long time. I've been killed many times in newspapers, in courts, within these walls. I've been in the other world for a long time. I have nothing left in this world. And there, nothing awaits me there either. Only emptiness.
After this conversation, Chikatilo was led through the corridors of the Rostov prison to a separate cell. There, without warning, he was executed with a single shot to the back of the head. Before he was taken away, he said only one thing.
Give my regards to those with whom I worked on the delivery.